Gadsby's Tavern in Alexandria, Virginia, is a historic building. Well, a complex of buildings. It includes the original tavern that was constructed in 1785, a hotel addition built in 1792, then a further addition to the hotel section in 1878. The most famous guests to the tavern and hotel are America's founding fathers George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe. The Marquis de Lafayette was even a guest during his tour of the U.S. in 1824. Although no longer a hotel, the tavern's restaurant is still in operations. The hotel itself is now a museum, the Gadsby's Tavern Museum, as well as offices for the local American Legion Post. It gets a lot of visitors today, mostly history buffs. One of the most requested rooms to tour is Room 8, but not for any of the previous guests mentioned. Room 8 is most well known for a female guest. Do you know her name? Well, if you do, please let us all know, because no one else seems to know, and it's a mystery that has troubled historians for centuries. Today, and for the last few hundred years, she's simply been known as the female stranger. Everyone loves a good, strange, weird, or bizarre story. Well, welcome to the American South, where dark legends and haunted history lurk around every corner. Where superstition, folklore, and a touch of backwoods magic blend with everyday culture, some say, in order to survive. This is Dixie After Dark. There's a grave in St. Paul's Cemetery in Alexandria, Virginia, that has become historically famous, although it was never intended to be that way. The grave is that of an unknown person from 1816, and the romanticized legends that surround it took the site to national fame. Speculation as to who the unknown woman is has baffled historians from the 1800s all the way to today. In modern times, the gravesite has become known as the Grave of the Female Stranger. Although it has become worn and faded over the centuries, the inscription reads, "To the memory of a female stranger, whose mortal sufferings terminated on the 14th day of October, 1816, aged 23 and 8 months. This stone is placed here by her disconsolate husband, whose in arms she sighed out her last breath, and who under God did his utmost even to soothe the cold dead ear of death. How loved, how valued, once avails thee not, to whom related or whom begot. A heap of dust alone remains of thee, 'tis all thou art, and all the proud shall be. To him gave all the prophets witness, that through his name whosoever believeth in him shall receive remissions of sin." The story has changed little over the centuries outside of small details being added here and there. For the most part, this is how the story goes. A ship known as Four Sons was traveling from Nova Scotia to the West Indies when suddenly it changed course for the Potomac River due to a sickness on board. The ship let down a single lifeboat that contained a man and a woman. Presumably a couple, it was the woman that carried some sort of sickness. She wore a black veil, something that remains constant through her entire time on land in Virginia. No one ever reported seeing her face. The couple made their way to the nearest inn, the Gadsby's Tavern, and the male traveler immediately sent for a doctor. The couple were given room 8 in the tavern, and the doctor was assisted by 2 other women who were staying at the hotel at the time. For some strange reason, both the doctor and the 2 women assisting him were sworn to secrecy as to who the couple were and everything else that happened during their stay. Ultimately, the work of the doctor did no good, and the unknown female passed away. It's said that only her apparent husband alone witnessed her death. The story also says that he prepared the body for burial and sealed the coffin, all on his own. The only attendants at the funeral were the unknown man, the doctor, the 2 women that had helped the doctor, and a local priest. The story goes on to say that the unknown man left town shortly after the burial, but returned every fall to place flowers at the grave. That's the basic core of the legend, but a bit of details have emerged over the years, whether it be from actual historical research or fictional attempts at a more romantic tale is up for you to decide. The gravesite itself took on an air of mystery, an oddity that kept the curious intrigued, and the story began to spread. One of the earliest known accounts of the story outside of the grave marker itself comes from 1833. A poem telling of a visit to the grave was published in 1834 in the Alexandria Gazette under the initials SD. The writer was later identified as poet Susan Rigby Dallam Morgan from Baltimore. Her husband had the poem published after his wife's own death a year earlier. 2 years later, in 1836, the Philadelphia Saturday Courier published a column on the story, taking it to a national audience. The column was written by someone calling themselves Lucy Seymour, a known pen name used by Susan Rigby Dallam Morgan. In that column, the female stranger was said to have been a young foreign woman with, quote, a tearful face and pale complexion. It's said in that telling that the female stranger confided only in the local priest, but that he was sworn to secrecy. The person writing as Seymour does not name any of their sources, but says that she took interest in the cemetery itself first, before stumbling upon the grave of the female stranger. Whether this column was written by Susan Rigby Dallam Morgan at the same time as her poem and published posthumously as the original poem, or if it was someone totally different using the popular pen name, is unknown. In 1848, 12 years after the Philadelphia Saturday Courier column, the Alexandria Gazette published another article on the female stranger, responding to an article on the subject in the Baltimore Sun. The news article said that the stranger was a beautiful woman of pale complexion, and outlined her graceful movements and the admiration of those that witnessed her. The article goes on to give the last name of Clermont to the unknown man. It also puts a new twist on the story, claiming that the $1,500 the man used to pay his bills in Alexandria was later identified as counterfeit. A local businessman, Lawrence Hill, is said in the article to have tracked down and confronted the unknown man years later in Sing Sing prison in New York. As out of left field as that claim seemed, history has proven that Lawrence Hill was an actual person, and records seem to back up those claims, at least the timeline. Lawrence Hill was a known businessman that lived in Alexandria at the time the female stranger would have been there and passed away. Furthermore, Lawrence Hill sold his house in Alexandria in 1830, according to property records, then moved to New York, where Sing Sing prison is located. Lawrence Hill died while still living in New York in 1849. speculation arose that tried to identify the female stranger as Theodosia Burr Alston, the daughter of founding father and third vice president of the United States, Aaron Burr. Although that theory is dismissed by most historians due to contradictions in dates relating to Theodosia's life and the events in Alexandria. In 1886, travel writer Frank George Carpenter published a piece that included the story of the female stranger. He points out that Alexandria was a wealthy trading port at the time, and that the unknown couple was British. Again, no sources are given, but it seems to correlate with the original accounts of the couple being foreigners. In 1887, Fred D. Massey published in the Cincinnati Commercial Gazette that the couple was reportedly British. Massey's writing is one of the first to begin to add a romantic aspect to the tale, saying the two were locked in a kiss when the female stranger passed away. The unknown man left Alexandria by ship after the funeral, but according to Massey, he was later spotted in New Orleans. Massey suggested that the unknown man later returned to Alexandria with a work crew and had the body of the female stranger exhumed, taking the body away with him. In 1893, the Times-Picayune of New Orleans got in on the story, stating that the female stranger was in fact Theodosia Burr Alston. They used a witness account that showed Theodosia's husband, Governor Alston, visiting the gravesite, although it is important to point out that the article would have been 70 years afterwards. In 1898, the Washington Evening Star reported that two elderly people visited the gravesite and told the groundskeeper that they were acquaintances of the female stranger. They identified the female stranger as an English noblewoman who had run away with a British officer. The two people told the caretaker they would return when they had more time to explain the entire story, but they never did. One of the most popular speculations from across the Atlantic says that the female stranger was Sarah Curran, fiancée of Irish revolutionist Robert Emmet, who could have possibly been forced to marry off to a British naval officer. Of course, the writer of that article does point out that this is pure speculation on their part. Not all of the tales include a touch of romance or star-crossed lovers, though. Another popular version of the story identifies the female stranger as Blanche Forden, the daughter of a poor single woman from Cornwall, England. Blanche was later adopted and taken to Martinique, an island in the Caribbean. There enters two men into the story, John Trust and John Rowe, two Frenchmen who moved from France to Martinique after the fall of Napoleon. In the Caribbean, both men met and fell in love with Blanche. That's right, both men. Rather than compete for her affection, though, John Rowe is said to have used black magic to seduce Blanche onto a ship. It's said that she remained in a hypnotic state, and Rowe took advantage of that and had the ship's captain marry the two. In this legend, though, it would appear that Rowe may have done something wrong with his spell. Blanche never came out of her hypnotic state. As a matter of fact, it seems the spell was also taking a toll on her physical health as well. By the time the ship neared the port of Alexandria, Blanche was near death. When Rowe carried Blanche into their room at the Gadsby's Tavern, it's said that the marker for room 8 was knocked loose, falling sideways, to make an infinity symbol. If this was a sign of everlasting love or everlasting death is up to you. The story itself has went on to carry an urban legend-like appeal in Alexandria. and with most urban legends, the story of the female stranger carries a fair amount of ghost stories with it as well. It's reported that the ghostly image of the female stranger can still be seen in the window of room 8 at the Gadsby's Tavern. From what I could find, this seemed to start during a ball being held at the Gadsby's Tavern. A male guest in attendance became infatuated with a woman standing at the other side of the ballroom, standing all alone, holding a single lit candle. The woman first caught his attention because, although she was dressed elegantly, the fashion of her clothing seemed a lot older than the others in attendance. The woman smiled at him, then turned and moved down a hallway. The man followed along, trying to catch up with her. The woman turned and entered room 8. When the man got to the room, there was no one there, and the single candle sat on an end table, extinguished. The man brought a tavern employee to the room to try to find out who the guest was, but the employee explained that none of the rooms were occupied that night, as they were scheduled for maintenance upkeep in the next following days. The man then closer examined the single candle and found the wick completely white and unused, although it was still hot to the touch. Since then and into modern times, people have reported her ghostly figure in the window, holding a lit candle on some nights. Others have reported the ghost of the female stranger lurking in the hallways of the Gadsby's Tavern. There are reports of shadowy figures appearing and disappearing, as well as items in the building being moved on their own. Although this section of the Gadsby's Tavern no longer operates as a hotel, it is open as a museum where visitors can see room 8, and Gadsby's Tavern itself still operates as a fine dining restaurant. If any of you have been there, I'd love to hear if you've had any experiences or not. As far as the ghost of the female stranger, there has always been a special place in my heart for these type of tales. I often find myself after reading about these wondering, why are they still here? Does depression really last that long? Maybe they just need a friend or to be accepted for who or what they are. I don't know. My mind jumps around like that. Still though, I can't help but wonder, if the spirit encounters the right person, would she tell her story? Would she tell us who she is? Or does the mystery behind it all give just enough energy to keep her going in some fashion or another? I'll leave you with the poem, The Stranger's Grave, written by Miss Morgan back in 1833, that started the intrigue behind the entire legend. The day was bright, the air serene, and spring had robbed the fields in green, when I the city fled, to rove a while beyond its den, and all the bushy haunts of sin, and commune with the dead. A grove of cedars, tall and dark, my wandering eye did first remark, as I nearer drew, and thought I'd ask the owner's name, but ere I could the question frame, 2 graveyards met my view. One I approached, and many a tomb arose amidst the place of gloom of those beneath to tell. A child here slept, a parent there, some died of age, some young and fair, but all had been loved well. One separate from the rest appeared, my careful hands so it seemed reared, which iron rails enclosed. My eager feet soon reached the place, that I the epitaph might trace, and learn who there reposed. The tomb was marble, and round it grew some trees but dry, and leafless too, with the look of woe. From all the other graves apart, this seemed some poor broken heart, the last retreat below. Within a female stranger slept, No record of her name was kept upon the marble lead. The tablet no account supplied, save that she lived, had suffered and died, and that her date was brief. My fancy seized that slender thread, and by its guidance sought to tread the path her footsteps trod, to trace the hopes, the years and strife, which marked her short and troubled life, until she reached that sod. But no fiducial proof could I, in wild conjectures range, descry, to cast on truth one ray, and with a sympathizing breast I left that slumbered place of rest, her dreamless bed of clay. Sleep, stranger, sleep, many none presume, with impious hand to raise thy tomb, o'er which such mystery waves, kindling an interest in thy lot, which even consecrates the spot, and from oblivion saves. My fancy oft shall hover round this silent, nameless, leaf-strewn mound, a female stranger's tomb, and in the morn that wakes the just, I hope to see the sleeping dust arise in glorious bloom.